And this report that we're going to be talking about today is nothing short of explosive. It's been picked up by the media all over the world, but not by the British media. This report is based on secret Hamas documents in Arabic that were seized by the IDF.
And in those documents, it says the French consular official is actually a PFLP member, and the UK one was formerly a PFLP official.
Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, one of the terror groups within Gaza, prescribed in the UK.
I'm speechless.
Yeah, I mean, how is this not front page news?
If you care about Palestinians, why are you silent about that? I mean, that's the part I don't understand.
Taxpayers' money being accumulated in Britain and it ending up in the pockets of Hamas. I mean, where are the checks and balances along the line?
Billions of dollars in aid was going in, even if it's 20%, even though the estimates are 40 to 70.
Even if it's 20%, it's still a ludicrous amount of our taxpayers' money
getting diverted.
We're being played. Hello, and thank you for joining us on The Brink for our first episode since the depraved Hanukkah attack on Bondi Beach. Needless to say, our hearts go out to the victims and their families. Sound people in the West must remain united, resolute, and defiant. We will win. I'm Jake Wallace-Simons.
And I'm Andrew Fox. And of course, I'd like to echo Jake's words and send condolences to all those affected by the attacks in Australia. This week, we're joined by Anne Herzberg, the legal advisor for NGO Monitor, an Israel-based research institute that scrutinises charities and NGOs working in the Middle East, checking that they operate with the principles of accountability, transparency, and human rights.
Now, NGO Monitor has recently released an explosive report revealing in detail how Hamas manipulates NGOs funded by British, American, Canadian, and European taxpayers. Its techniques include embedding operatives inside them and subjecting them to constant surveillance.
The report, which is based on a trove of Arabic documents seized in Gaza by the IDF, also discloses how the NGOs themselves have been complicit in furthering the Hamas agenda. Needless to say, this has barely been covered by the mainstream media, so we're taking a deep dive today.
Now, before we begin the conversation, just to let you know, on the 19th of January, we'll be recording our first ever live episode of The Brink at JW3 in North London, joined by the Countdown presenter and campaigner Rachel Riley and the brilliant polemicist Brendan O'Neill. So grab your ticket at the JW3 website and join us on January the 19th in conversation in person.
And if you're looking for a last-minute festive present, why not give a special someone a year's subscription to The Brink? Simply head to www.thebrinkpodcast.substack.com, subscribe and click gift.
If you're enjoying our podcast, don't forget to like, subscribe, share it and leave a comment. We love to know what you think. And if you're listening on audio, give the podcast 5 stars.
Now, without further ado, we present Anne Herzberg on The Brink. Anne Herzberg, welcome to The Brink.
Thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
It's great you're here. I thought we'd probably start if you could, introduce yourself to the audience and maybe just talk a little bit about NGO Monitor and what you do.
Yeah, sure. So I am the legal advisor at NGO Monitor. We are based in Jerusalem, a research organization. We were founded by Professor Gerald Steinberg in 2001 following the UN Durban Conference Against Racism, which actually turned into a racist conference, you may remember. Tremendous anti-Semitism in the streets. And the founder of our organization is Professor Steinberg is a I would say a real visionary, because he saw at the time that who was driving a lot of the anti-Semitism at the conference were non-governmental organizations, and not just, random activist groups, but human rights organizations of, who we were all very familiar with, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch. And many of these groups were really leading.
Oxfam.
I'm not sure if Oxfam was there, but most likely they were. They were really leading a lot of what was going on there, which included barring Israelis from meetings, anti-Semitic signage, marches in the street. And as an academic, he originally was involved with disarmament policy. And he saw that there really wasn't any systematic study of these non-governmental organizations, which had tremendous power and influence, tremendous budgets, more money than many corporations. Oxfam's budget is about $1 billion. Médecins Sans Frontières, same thing. Amnesty, 300 million pounds, around that. And these organizations were really driving policy. And so he founded NGO Monitor. I've been working there almost 20 years, which is really crazy. And yeah, we look at, what these groups are up to. We analyze the claims they make. I do a lot on the legal side, examining the legal claims, how they operate at the UN.
And what are some of your biggest successes over the years?
Yes. So I would say personally at the group, I, in 2008, coined in the conflict the term lawfare. Someone a general from the United States came up with the term, but I was the first to really identify it within the conflict. And that really gave me a lot of satisfaction because following that was a real focus of what governments were looking at. Spain, the UK changed their laws as a result of these NGO campaigns that were trying to get Israeli officials arrested when they would come to the UK. So that stopping a lot of the money, we've stopped probably $200 million from going to bad actors, looking into terror links to a lot of these NGOs. So, and I think now our new report really is a major success for us.
Well, it's really interesting with these NGOs, how much influence they have, even more broadly than just governments. Because in my last job when I was teaching at Sandhurst, there's a part of one of the modules where you're training the officer cadets how to deal with NGOs when they're on the ground. Things about their neutrality and that kind of thing. And obviously their tenet is neutrality, isn't it? And they breach this all the time. And I remember at the start of the Gaza war, somebody I worked with they posted on our group WhatsApp a report from Médecins Sans Frontières, and they said with the comment, well, this is what they say, and it doesn't get any more neutral than that.
Oh my God.
And the perception is incredible.
It is. Yeah, we call it the halo effect. If you say you're dealing with humanitarian affairs or human rights, the public automatically puts this, sheen of you can do no wrong, you're acting completely altruistically, and not really looking at who the people are running these organizations, what their aims are, what they're doing with the money, which is also often many times taxpayer money.
And this report that we're going to be talking about today, new report, is nothing short of explosive to me and to Andrew. And you were saying just before we began recording that it's been picked up by the media all over the world, but not by the British media.
It's really quite astounding. I believe the Jewish Chronicle covered it this week, but the wider British media has not really looked at the story. And what I find amazing about that is many of the NGOs in the report are UK-based, and a lot of the programs involve 50 million pounds annually, lots of money pouring into these groups
UK taxpayer
money.
And not a peep.
So far, no. We hope. We're still trying to get some of the bigger outlets to publish it, but...
And why do you think that is? I mean, is that part of a pattern in the UK?
I do find that because in previous reports where we talk about this, the same thing happens. I do think part of it is this halo effect. I think a lot of it has to do, unfortunately, I think with the libel laws here, it has a chilling effect on the media. Because people are afraid.
People can manipulate our libel laws, bad actors, Islamists, and so forth, can manipulate them to silence the press.
Exactly.
Yeah, I've experienced that myself.
Oh, wow.
To some great extent, yeah.
Yeah, so I think people are afraid, even when everything's fully documented, and it's a lot of the times, not that there isn't libel, but...
I was saying to you just the other day, I've been inside newsrooms of national papers working on a story, or suggesting a story, or stories come up, and it's a story that we know is true, we can prove that it's true, but we're not going to run it because the libel laws allow Muslim Brotherhood-driven charities, individuals, even barristers, to come at us and nitpick and find ways to make it more trouble than it's worth to do the story. That's how editors see it. We know how much hassle we're going to get on that story. Is it really worth it for them, for the amount of eyeballs we're going to get on the story? And then the equation changes. I think, you know what, let's just leave it and do something else that's easier.
Yeah,
and
100%.
That's why I've seen that time and time again. I've worked on stories that have been spiked for that reason.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. I think also, unfortunately, I do think the British media, it's been bad in the media in general when it comes to Israel. But I mean, I come here quite frequently, and when I watch the news here, it's really at a different level than what you see in other countries.
Oh, really? How so?
And
How do you mean?
and I do think,
How's it on a different level?
well, for instance, I was here when the first hostage release happened in November 2023. And very few of the networks were actually talking about the hostages. They were mostly focusing on the Palestinian terrorists that were being released.
Right.
There was very little talk about that, or just the nature of hostage taking, how terrible it was. It's an international crime. And that was not the focus. And I really couldn't believe it. There was a lot of like prisoner exchange was the language used.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, outrageous.
But also, you mentioned again before we came on air, all the best conversations happen.
I know, right?
that there's also in British officialdom, in the world of diplomacy and government, there's some problematic relationships between our officials and terrorists. Is that what you were saying? And then you talk about the tweet. And can you talk about that to people?
Yeah, I do think the government here does not want to talk about this topic. It's very uncomfortable. I think a lot of it is they have their program, the FCDO, this is what they're doing.
That's a foreign
yes.
office, yeah.
And they don't want any interference in that program, in their development plan. I think a lot of it has to do with that. I think
we know best.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Mm.
It's paternalistic. I think also it's embarrassing, frankly, a lot of the details. So, for instance, we found in May, we published a report, which also was quite explosive, but we had a similar problem getting
what did it find, the May report?
So the May report was looking at a cash-based program that the UK was funding via UNICEF in Gaza. And we had found a UK document that was talking about the risks involved in this cash program. And in the document, they mention that one of the risks was that it was being done in conjunction with the Ministry of Social Development in Gaza, which is a Hamas ministry. And they were basically saying one of the risks was that it would be with Hamas, that Hamas would be involved. And what was their role? Picking the beneficiaries.
Hamas's role was to pick who gets the money
from this ministry.
And that was a risk, but it wasn't a showstopper for the UK government.
What was the risk? That their reputation would be hurt. Not that they were much less concerned with the aid diversion. They did mention it, but the bigger risk to them was their reputation. And I think that that's a lot of what's going on here too.
And was that the report that the embassy in Israel, the British embassy in Israel, responded to immediately with the post on X?
Yes. So I was on Israeli TV. We launched the story there. And then immediately, it was within minutes of the story airing, the British embassy in Israel put a post on X, basically, denying the allegations, claiming, no, we work with Ramallah ministry. We're not working with the Hamas ministries in Gaza. And of course, we don't deal with Hamas. That would be illegal as a prescribed organization under British law. But then
you've got the paperwork saying.
But yeah, we have the paperwork. Plus these new documents, which we'll get into, completely confirms the story.
Well, let's get into that then, shall we?
Yeah, so your new report is Puppet Regime, Hamas's coercive grip on aid and NGOs in Gaza.
Yes, and I have a copy here, and it's available on our website if anyone is interested.
Completely open source. You don't have to pay for it. You can just get it on the website.
Exactly,
Yeah, so I thought it'd be useful, if we went into this in some detail, because there's some pretty explosive stuff in there. And as you say, it's amazing. This hasn't been picked up by the media, particularly in the UK. So the first thing you talk about at the start is something called guarantors.
Yes.
Now, could you explain what those are and what role they play?
Yes. So basically, in Gaza, the way the humanitarian aid system works, Gaza is controlled by Hamas, a terrorist organization. And I think people try to whitewash that or ignore what that means. I think you have to look at it in many ways as if it's the mob or kind of a drug cartel. They're in complete control of the territory.
Mixed with the Stasi, actually, sort of drug cartel.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. I think that's a good, And so one of the ministries in Gaza is the Internal Security Ministry, which again operates like a Stasi. And any aid organization that wants to operate in Gaza has to get permission from Hamas. Now, Hamas knows that a lot of the NGOs that were coming in are international. So before the war, there were about 70 international NGOs operating there, 13 UN agencies, 70 plus international organizations. And what they would do is they would cultivate a guarantor, a liaison between them and the organization. And they weren't appointed by Hamas, but they try to get at least one person in every organization that essentially would act as a spy, really.
And to clarify, this was because the NGOs weren't allowed technically to liaise directly with Hamas because it's a terrorist organization. And so to get around that, there was this intermediary of a guarantor, which, as you're saying, Hamas appointed.
Yeah, so Hamas didn't appoint the guarantors, but I think it's partially that. It's a workaround because Hamas is designated, but I think even in the absence of those laws, this system would still be in place because it allowed Hamas, basically, they basically had a person on the inside. Even though they weren't appointed by them, they would approach people or people would come to them, and they would make sure that the person that they had on the inside was a more senior level employee, and basically would report on what was going on at the organization.
Whose heart was with Hamas.
Basically.
That was working inside the NGOs.
Yeah, exactly. Now, some of them, what's amazing is, and in the report, you can see the document, we have a list of 55 individuals from 48 NGOs. Now, there may be more, but this is what we had access to, this particular document. And they list, besides personal details of all the people, they list who they're affiliated with. So in some cases, the people are actual Hamas members. They will say that. Other times they will say, what is their security profile? So they'll say great or excellent. A few cases, no, like they were more unsure of what would this person be loyal or reliable? But in most cases, they had excellent security profiles. So Hamas was not worried in any situation that they were going to, be spying on Hamas, let's say, that they would do what they were told.
We should probably say at this point that we haven't actually covered this, that this report is based on secret Hamas documents.
Yes.
In Arabic that was seized by the IDF, a treasure trove of documents brought out of Gaza, and that's where you get this from.
Yes.
So it's from their own mouth. It's from
exactly.
Their own records,
So the IDF basically, through the course of the wars, recovered thousands of documents. In news recounts, you may see it being referred to in other contexts. But they were declassified, and we were given access to some of them.
And you've got the surveillance notes of some of these guarantors, including things like who they're having affairs with, how they dress, whether it's modest or not, what their religious views are, their political views are, even their strength of personality and susceptibility to intimidation or manipulation. That's the Stasi part.
Yeah.
So they're keeping such close tabs on these people because they want people to be representatives of Hamas as close as they can get within NGO organizations to represent their interests and to get them a good further their agenda, I suppose.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, exactly. And it's a way to maintain the atmosphere of intimidation. Because you can't, I think that's the thing also that is not acknowledged. I really, since the war, I've been calling it an omerta in the humanitarian aid industry, because these organizations are not talking about what it's like to operate in Gaza, like what is happening there. And this is a perfect example of that. So they have files on the NGOs, very intimate files about all of these people, and they control what they're doing. And you can't say no, because if you say no, you could be in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, and there's an example in the paper about Save the Children not sharing their financial data. And so Hamas directed that their activities would be restricted.
Yeah, exactly. And eventually a lot of the NGOs comply because they want to do their work. And so they put up with it.
And is it worth, I think, maybe at this point, raising the issue of Hamas's civil servers versus Hamas, the combatants?
Yeah.
Because there's a famous incident where the former head of the news department at the BBC, who since left post, gave a briefing over Zoom to all the news staff, where she said it was very important to distinguish between the two. Do you think that's a fair
I think it's a fallacy. I mean, I really do think that's a fallacy, which they definitely do. You see it in UN reports, the military wing, the political wing, to try to maintain the separation. But what we saw in these documents, when you're dealing with the internal security and you're dealing with a lot of these ministries, the people involved in them are also military people in many cases.
Because they carry rank, don't they?
Exactly.
It's like saying that the civilian wing of Nazi Germany was Adolf Eichmann.
Yeah, right.
That's like that, isn't it?
Exactly. So,
and the framework. So there's this organization within Hamas called what's it called? MOINS, Moines? Do you say Moines?
We call it Moines. I don't know. That's our
Ministry of Interior and National Security, and they're the ones that control how NGOs behave in Gaza. And I think it's worth quoting a line from the report, which gives a great summary, which says that Hamas describes, in the documents that were seized by the IDF, Hamas describes its surveillance of NGO officials and offices, methods for manipulating foreign-funded humanitarian groups funded by us, by the Americans, by the Europeans, by the West, not by the Arab states, which I'll ask you about in a minute.
Yeah.
And the military and intelligence gathering considerations that guide the limitations they impose on NGO activity, and how NGOs were complicit in this regime, hiding or downplaying Hamas's abuses and acquiescing to their demands.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty outrageous, So
what's another example? So in addition to the guarantors, what else can you give as an example of this interaction between the two, hand in glove interaction?
Yeah. So one of the ones I think that was most shocking to me was the Norwegian Refugee Council, which also gets a lot of money from the UK.
A lot of airtime on the media as well.
Yeah. And to operate in Gaza, they also operate a cash-based program in Gaza. A delegation they were visiting beneficiaries. And so they went to the apartment of an elderly couple. And it was an elderly man and his wife, and the wife had a lot of physical injuries. But when they got to the apartment, they noticed the walls were crumbling and one of the walls was about to collapse and the floor was crumbling. And the man who lived there said to them, "Do you think this is happening to my apartment because there's a tunnel under my apartment?" And they didn't respond. And this is recounted in the Hamas memo. So clearly, someone from the NRC guarantor, presumably, or maybe a Hamas minder was with them. It's unclear, but it appears to be from the NRC guarantor. Recounted the story, and it ended up in the documents.
And what does that tell us? I mean, were they giving money that would be used in the tunnel building, or?
Well, I think what it tells me is that this person's problems in his apartment were not because evil Israel was, withholding the aid.
Right.
It was probably because there was a tunnel under his apartment.
So, but the Norwegian Refugee Council blamed Israel for it, are you saying?
I'm not saying in this particular case, I don't know, but I think what it shows is that the NRC knew that these things were happening. So what did they do about it? I don't remember. I mean, I haven't seen much about the tunnels on NRC's website. Behind the scenes, I don't know what they're doing.
They haven't mentioned it at all.
So it's a kind of complicity by omission.
Yeah, that's exactly. And that's why I call it an omerta, because they're not speaking out about it. I mean, you would think if you're a humanitarian actor, that would be something you would want to talk about. Like, that is
to the world.
To the world, exactly. And certainly if it was happening in Israel, something like that, they would be screaming to the hills about it everywhere you could look.
But in Gaza, if you speak about it, Hamas cut your access, which means you can't operate there anymore. So you have to stay silent, or they won't let you.
Exactly.
And I noticed in the files, Hamas showed a huge amount of concern for their security.
Yes.
That was almost one of the most important things in these files, wasn't it?
Yes. So I mean, it's really kind of this paranoia comes out. I mean, they definitely, I think, have an attitude towards these international NGOs as being security threats. And so you see that a lot of what they're doing, they're afraid of. One of the things that in several of the cases, there were several cases of this, NGOs would come up with questionnaires, presumably to target the aid better, to find out what people need. It's a little unclear. But Hamas, this ministry, would vet the questions. And if there were questions that they believe were going to elicit some type of information that could pose a security problem, they would strike the question from the questionnaire. So you see, we don't know what those questions were. That's not available in these documents. But you see how they're, down to that level, trying to control what's going on.
And it shows the reach they have as well, that they can actually enforce that.
Yeah, exactly.
Say, hey, NGO, take that out of your questionnaire.
Yeah. Or there's another case where I believe it was an Oxfam branch was doing a project with fruit trees.
Yes.
Also pretty shocking.
Tell us about the fruit trees. That's a great example.
It's a crazy story. So apparently they were doing a project using recycled wastewater.
This is Oxfam.
Oxfam.
Funded by...
Well, I believe it was the Dutch branch of Oxfam. So I'm not. I believe the German government was funding the program, but don't hold me to that. I'm not sure.
But Oxfam receives funding in general from all
many
the major
governments,
Western countries. Yeah,
exactly. And so they were doing this program, recycled wastewater, and they wanted to do. And there did appear to be reticence. It's also very culturally interesting. These documents. There was reticence for this program because I think they believe the agriculture and the trees would be poisoned by the wastewater. So people in Gaza didn't really want.
You mean the locals, right?
Didn't
they were
want
skeptical
this.
of the plan,
and I believe this comes out also from Hamas. So I think basically the program is going to involve orchards along the border with Israel, and so Hamas is expressing concern about this program because this area is sensitive, they say, to both the occupied occupation or whatever.
The occupation forces which aren't in Gaza.
Right.
They're not occupation. I mean, they're not in your...
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the resistance,
Right.
These are the terms they use because these trees are used for cover for military activities. And so I think they were worried that Oxfam would come in and do this irrigation and the trees would all die. It seemed like that's what they were concerned about.
I see.
But then they said, but they're working with this local contractor and they're aligned with Hamas, so it's all okay. So they were not concerned because they knew this local contractor that would be carrying out the project would either make sure the trees didn't die or wouldn't work in an area where it could be compromised.
So they're working their aid distribution or provision of services and infrastructure around Hamas military objectives.
Right. So it's unknown. Did Oxfam know about this? We don't know. Oxfam, we just don't know what the people knew about it, or if they knew that this local contractor was Hamas, or Hamas supporting.
Yeah, I think
it raises a lot of questions.
Yeah, the biggest question for me is, should they have known? Should NGOs have been aware of the nature of some of the projects they were undertaking? And if they should have been aware, why weren't they, or why are they covering it up? That's the really big question for me.
So another example is we published it in a report that came out beforehand about their operations in hospitals. How this was working, and I think it's very clear that there were areas of the hospitals that the NGOs were not allowed to go to. It was very clear certain places were off limits. So I think you could credibly say, even if the organizations didn't know specifically what was happening, they did know there were areas that were off limits. And it did come out in news accounts. I remember reading going back to 2009, talking about that.
Yeah, I interviewed a doctor who'd worked in Gaza, and he said absolutely there were off limits areas with guards.
A British doctor.
British doctor. We know within the hospital there were areas that were guarded.
Yeah,
and people spoke about them.
Yeah,
and this was common knowledge.
Yeah, so it's hard to believe, even if they weren't involved. It's very hard to believe they didn't know.
But look, I mean, let's cut the cut the crap.
Yeah.
Because, if you're an organization working in Gaza for decades, year upon year, people on the ground, you're working with the local authorities, you get the gist of what's going on. Don't tell me you're going to be so naive that you don't realize what's going on. There's areas of the hospital that we can't go to. Oh, I wonder what that could be.
Right.
Or there's someone who seems like he's having conversations with that Hamas guy and then coming to work for us. What could that mean? I don't know. Or they don't want us to build something here, or they want us to ignore this, or this wall's collapsing, but we can't ask why. There was a UN data center, wasn't there, where a Hamas base was underground,
yes,
drawing all the power from the UN data center. Don't tell me they didn't know. Oh, where's our power going? How come the bill's so sky high? Oh, I don't know. And the thing is that these people are, all of the rhetoric they're giving to the world. I mean, I noted down, you've mentioned Norwegian Refugee Council. They have talked about, and I quote, Gaza's children, women and families are being deliberately starved in a disproportionate, relentless onslaught. They don't mince their words when they're blaming Israel for stuff.
Yeah.
Or Oxfam. Oxfam said Israel has created the, quote, perfect storm for humanitarian collapse, which it strikes me as a more accurate description of what the NGOs are doing in Gaza, accusing them of war crimes, weaponizing water, and turning Gaza into a death trap. That's exactly what Hamas have done with the complicity of these NGOs, and they don't say a word of criticism towards Hamas, despite seeing it with their own eyes on the ground.
Yeah, it's outrageous. And honestly, if you care about Palestinians, why are you silent about that? I mean, that's the part I don't understand. It seems to me like they're trading short-term benefit for a long-term disaster. I think on the one hand, many of them want to give help to people who need it. And certainly there are people who need help there. Don't want to deny that at all. But I think they've made a calculation that we want to give, assistance to these people, and we're not going to let anything else stop us. And we're not going to consider the long-term consequences of that. We're not going to consider that by doing that, you allow Hamas to get stronger. You allow Hamas to divert aid. There are accounts, people have done studies, especially on the cash-based programs, that 40 to 70% of aid is being diverted in these cash programs.
It's probably worth for anyone watching or listening to explain how a cash-based program works, because cash and voucher assistance is something I've been looking at recently, and I think it's scandalous how that's abused. Would you care to explain just how that works?
Yeah, sure. So I understand the thinking behind it, why they were set up, because when you think about it, cash, you can be more targeted in your aid. This family needs diapers. This family needs, something with their house. This family needs food. Okay. And cash, that way you can target the aid. You don't need a big warehouse to store everything.
So
and
they're
it's
physically
much more
giving them
efficient.
money instead of,
Right.
and they can go buy it themselves.
So the way it works in Gaza is they are getting either debit cards or cash apps. But it's not like for us where we have, Apple Pay and, you get money into your Apple Pay account and you can just, Hamas controls the apps. Or if you want to...
How does it control the apps?
Because you don't have things like Apple Pay there, from my understanding.
So it only allows certain people access to the apps?
So they take a cut.
Yeah, you have to change the...
Yeah.
If you want to draw money from the account, then it's... The way you're drawing from is quite often a Hamas money changer or similar. So they'll take they'll take a percentage to get people to take the money out.
Exactly. Or people want to convert it to cash rather than just using a debit card or something. If they want to convert it for cash, also, they have to go to the money changers who are linked with Hamas and give them a cut. So that's really and in that British government document where they were talking about the program, they were saying, that is one of the risks. Diversion is a risk of cash-based programs.
So they acknowledge that fully.
Yeah.
And of course, also, if you're spending that money in an ecosystem where it's Hamas selling the aid, they get a double cut, don't they?
Exactly.
Because not only have they charged you to pull the money out, but then when you give them the money for the aid, which is supposed to be free at the moment, they're then getting the money back twice over.
Exactly. Wow. Yeah.
So can you talk us through the system of oversight, such as it might exist, that might or might not be there between taxpayers' money being accumulated in Britain and it ending up in the pockets of Hamas? I mean, is there where are the checks and balances along the line?
It's very disturbing. And what's interesting is in 2024, we actually had a lawsuit against the FCDO, a Freedom of Information lawsuit, for looking at basically the money they were giving to the Norwegian Refugee Council. We had asked, who do they work with? Who are their partners?
With the NRC?
Yes. Because they used to publish that information. And then around 2018, 2019, that information disappeared from the UK development websites. So we wanted to know, who are you working with? Who are the local partners? And so we filed a Freedom of Information request with the FCDO. Delay, deny. This is, we can't tell you that information. This is national security, or this might harm our diplomatic relations with Israel. Yes, because it's very embarrassing and horrible what you're doing. So we got to the point of appeals. We had a hearing. I was here for the hearing. And we were able, and with the help of Jonathan Turner from UKLFI, he represented us.
That's UK Lawyers for Israel.
Yes. Yeah. And so we had this hearing, and we were able to question the witness, the FCDO representative. And one of the questions was, do you vet the sub-partners? How do you do vetting? And basically what she said was, we vet the higher level entity. So like, we think the Norwegian Refugee Council is okay. We don't do vetting of sub-partners. Now, whether or not they know who the money is going to, we don't know, because part of the hearing was closed evidence. So we were not allowed to hear that.
They must know.
Of course.
I mean, come on.
Of course they know. And I think because of all this that we've discovered, at the time, we actually thought some of the sub-partners were PFLP representatives.
Right,
and
the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, one of the terror groups within Gaza prescribed in the UK.
Yes. And so we thought, and we knew one of the partners was a PFLP-linked organization.
Which would be Medical Aid for Palestine?
No, it was Union of Agricultural Workers, UAWC. Okay. And so we knew they were working together, and we knew UAWC was prescribed in Israel as a PFLP entity, and their USAID had written things about how they're PFLP. Dutch government found 34 employees linked or officials linked to the PFLP at this NGO. So that's what we initially thought. But now that we've seen all of these documents from Hamas, it makes me wonder, maybe that's really what they didn't want coming out at the time of this lawsuit. And of course, we lost the appeal.
Well, they didn't want it to come out that what exactly?
That I think these programs were going on in Gaza, that Hamas was involved in determining beneficiaries, that this whole system was going on.
Right.
So, again, I don't know what oversight they're doing, because they won't tell us. And they want us to rely on their, their word.
Trust me, bro.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, whatever they're doing, it's not working very well.
No.
I mean, do you think that there's a kind of, I'm trying to get a sense of the attitude within British officialdom, and I suppose it's similar elsewhere in the world, but particularly British officialdom. Do you think they just see you as kind of irritating Zionists who are kind of monomaniacal and obsessive, and actually we're just trying to be fair, and the Palestinians really are the poor party here that needs to be supported, and yes, there's a few bad apples, but give them a bit of love and money, and sooner or later they'll become democratic, and it'll be all wonderful. The real enemy is Israel, and that's, you're all a bit distasteful and rude and obnoxious. Do you think it's that?
I think that has a lot to do with it. I think also, though, I see this in a lot of NGO reporting, I think there's an attitude in the humanitarian aid community that they are above the rules. We're doing humanitarian aid, because there was this one document where this was actually shortly after Hamas was fully prescribed in November 2021 by the UK government. So a couple months later, they were called in to the office by Hamas to say, hey, what's going on with this designation? And
Who were called in, sorry?
It was a Norwegian Refugee Council official.
Was called in by Hamas in Gaza.
To a meeting.
Right.
Or unless they already had a meeting. But it was basically the notes of this meeting. And basically Hamas is asking them, what's going to happen with this designation? And they basically say, we don't think anything's going to change. We wouldn't accept conditions anyway if they place them on us.
Wow.
Yeah. And we know also a lot of these groups have lobbied and have been successful in the United States, for instance, in weakening counterterror regulations. So, for instance, USAID used to have a 10-year look back. USAID has the strongest oversight mechanisms, and they're still very good. But they had a rule so they had this rule where any aid you had to look back 10 years to see, are there any links to terrorist organizations? And also you had to do a very broad review. Because a lot of times with the NGOs and what the UN does, it's very technical. So if the name is on the list, the designated lists, okay. But the UN list doesn't have any Palestinian terrorists listed, but these NGOs were very influential in getting that policy change from 10 years to 3, a 3-year look back, and also to narrow the scope of the look back. And so I just think that's also their attitude. We're above the rules.
But they're working for Hamas.
I mean
to further Hamas's agenda. They're working to help them.
I mean, I think that's the impact of a lot of what they do.
But to reduce the terror look back from 10 years, which is greater scrutiny, to 3 years, which is less scrutiny, who does that benefit? It benefits the terrorists.
And they argue that they can do their aid better because we're, if it's so onerous, these conditions.
I just want to can I just repeat this to you because it's doing my head in already.
Yeah.
So so let me get this straight, right? 2021, the UK prescribes Hamas in its entirety, political and terrorist wings. They're both terrorists, right? Then there's a meeting just afterwards with the Norwegian Refugee Council, an NGO helping the Palestinians in Gaza, and they're funded by the UK. And the official, from which nationality is the official, do you know?
I don't know. I don't know if it was their local guarantor or I don't remember. Yeah.
Somebody speaking for the NRC.
Yes.
Meets with Hamas, and Hamas says, we've just been prescribed in the UK. What's going on? And the official says, don't worry, it probably won't make any difference. And even if it did, we wouldn't obey those laws anyway. Is that what happened?
I mean, that's what it sounded like from reading the document. And also the UK consular official also met with them.
Met with Hamas?
Yeah. And said the same message.
Wait. So you've got documents with minutes of meetings where the UK consular official, who's a British citizen?
I don't know if he's a British citizen.
Okay, but an official. Do you have his name?
I do, but I don't want to say.
Okay. So he meets. So he meets directly with a member of Hamas.
Yes.
In Gaza, in 2021.
It would have been January or February 2022.
2022.
Right after the
proscription.
Yeah.
And what happens in that meeting?
So similar thing. Basically, Hamas wants assurances. Is this going to change the aid? What's going to happen? And again, reassured. Don't worry.
And by change the aid, what Hamas is really saying is, are we going to start losing money?
Well, exactly.
Nudge, wink, wink. And the consular official says, don't worry, you're all fine.
Yeah. And
money's still coming your way. Yeah. Relax.
And also basically said, that was just to appease the Zionists, the domestic.
Say that. Not in so many words.
I mean, essentially.
So he says the designation was just a political thing to keep the Jews quiet in Britain. It doesn't really affect matters on the ground for you. You're still getting your cash. That
seemed to be the import of what he was saying. We have it in a report. You can find it on our website, like the exact language. That's the import.
I'm speechless.
Yeah. I mean, how is this not front page news?
If you've been enjoying the conversation so far, don't panic. To catch the rest of the episode, just head over to our Substack at thebrinkpodcast.co.uk.